There we go, that's a big one.
Look at that guy. That's a nice jumbo right there. If the camera was recording, then you got to see the bite, but yeah, that's a good one. We'll get him back right away. So, today we're gonna be talking all about perch, those beautiful, beautiful striped animals. I'm gonna be sharing a number of tips. I think we're gonna do 5 tips that'll help you catch more perch this season. And tip number 1, we're gonna say, understand the fishery that you're fishing. So one thing that's really critical is all these different perch fisheries fish differently. So if you're on Devil's Lake, for instance, you're looking for giant Christmas trees of fish, and then you're kind of working through the small ones to get to some of the bigger ones. Places like Mille Lacs, you know, you are looking for those bigger schools of fish, but more than anything, you're looking to be in areas where the fish are kind of moving around. Other fisheries, like if you're doing a shallow water bite later this winter, like you might just specifically want to be in areas where you're finding the right kind of weeds. You know, a lot of time that's the shorter Cara weeds, stuff like that. So understanding the fishery that you're on and how it can differ from other fisheries is really key. You know, if you are a Devil's Lake veteran, you know, going to Winnie, that's going to be a totally different deal. So understanding what you need to look for. I've gone to fisheries before where I've been like, wow, you know, we found some perch, you know, we're catching some of them. And it's like, no, you're not in the right area. If it doesn't look like a giant Christmas tree under your hole, then you need to move until you find a giant Christmas tree. So anyway, long story short, that's tip number 1. And that is, you know, understand the fishery that you're fishing. And this can be word of mouth, whatever, maybe just experience out there, but understand the fishery you're fishing and adjust properly. Don't waste time fishing stuff that's not what you should be looking for. Here we go. All right, tip number 2. Tip number 2, we're gonna talk about baits. So right here, I have a little tungsten on. And the tungsten is what I'm using personally to deal with tougher bites. This is just a really good finesse tactic. I like to put a couple worms on there. You can do spikes, you can do wax worms, stuff like that. Or you could run plastics as well, but tungsten is gonna be one category that I really like a lot from a jigging standpoint. And then another thing I really like too, I got my spoon rod up there on the dash of the truck. Spoons are always a go-to. You can use a Northland tungsten spoon. Not a lot of tungsten spoons on the market, but Northland's got a couple of them, and those are really great just because they fall so fast, especially if you're fishing in deep water. Flutter spoons I really like as well. And then from there, I'm a big proponent of hard baits. So a simple rattle bait is going to be a good option, or in addition to that, like a glide bait like a puppet minnow, but more of like the smaller, moderate size. So like for instance, if you're using the rip and shad, I like the smallest size of the rip and shad. You put some little waxies or spikes on the bottom, and the fish just absolutely love that. So rattle baits are a go-to, and same with the little puppet minnows as well. Like probably like a number 2. I wouldn't go bigger than a number 3 for sure. But tipping it is huge. Those fish, they just love to come up to it. They see that bigger profile from a distance, and they like to come, there's a good one on the screen right now. They like to come up to it and just nip at those treble hooks. So it's an effective tactic that you definitely got to use. All right, so another tip I got for you, big one, is always make sure you have dead stick ready, and especially always make sure you got minnows on you, because there's just something special about minnows when it comes to perch. But this is my drop shot setup right here, and drop shots are kind of my go-to, and I especially like them for perch, I gotta say. So basically I've got like my dead stick rod here, sensitive tip, so you can kind of see the bites there. And yeah, this is basically like the same setup I'll use for walleyes as well. Just a little octopus hook here. Number 4 is probably ideal for perch. But here's the drop shot weight. Here's the hook. And one thing that's great about the drop shot rig is, number 1, like if you're running and gunning, It is so easy to just take this, drop it down the hole, and just wait till the weight hits the bottom, and then you're set up at a pretty good distance off the bottom. Just tail hook a little crappie minnow on the back there. So that's one reason why I really like it, is because when you're running and gunning, it's super efficient. You don't have to have your flasher there. You can just kind of drop it down there and know that you're at a good depth. But the second reason I really like it too is if I am fishing in a shack or something and I just have a fish that's just eyeing me up and won't bite, just won't go, I can pop a minnow on this hook right here, and I can just drop it right down that same hole. Maybe I reel the dead stick out of this hole and I can drop it in that hole, and this will get down there very, very quickly because it's just a nice heavy weight and not much drag with just a minnow flopping behind it. So you can pull this out of your dead stick hole and drop it in your active jigging hole, and you can do it so quickly that sometimes you can pick up that big fish that's just staring your jig down or staring your spoon down and won't strike it. So anyway, long story short, dead sticks are super huge when it comes to perch, and a big reason for that too is just some days that's what they want, is a dead stick. So I've had days where I've watched the fish on the underwater camera and they are just kind of picking at your treble hook and your spoon, just softly, or maybe they don't quite want to close the gap, or maybe you got a tungsten jig and they just come up and just kind of try and nip at it, and then you drop a minnow down there and they just instantly woof the minnow. They don't snap at it, or, some days they will pick at it, but I've had a bunch of days where they're picking at everything, but the second you put a little minnow down there, it just instantly woofs the whole minnow and the minnow is gone. So that's the next tip. Never ever forget minnows. Always have a dead stick ready, because sometimes it can be a huge day saver for perch, and sometimes it won't just double the amount of fish that you catch over the course of a day because you have a second line. Sometimes it'll 3, 4, 5x it, because sometimes a little drop shot with a minnow on it is just what they want that day. There we go. It's a solid one. There's a proper jumbo right there. All right. The next tip I got for you. Look at that beauty. Gosh, I love perch. The next tip for you I got is just going to be talking about rod reel line. And my biggest piece of advice is just going to be not to overcomplicate it. So there we go. One last look. Just don't overcomplicate it. So what I have here is just some oversized panfish gear. So 36-inch rod. I use a lot of tuned up stuff. So this one's a 36-inch bullwhip. I have my 36-inch Fusion as well, which I like. It's not quite as fast of an action, breaks a little bit lower, but good rod overall. But honestly, if you just want to try perch fishing, you can get away with like a really light walleye rod. Dead stick rods are really, really good if you have one of those as well. And then from a reel standpoint, I mean, you can use an inline reel. You can use just a traditional spinning reel like this. I like to use like a 1000 size spinning reel is essentially going to be my go-to. And then from a line standpoint, I would say it would be a big mistake if you had like really heavy line, like 8-10 pound tests. But for me, like that perfect in between, I mean, if you just want to take your panfish setup and go out, if you had 2-pound line or whatever, 3-pound line, that would be fine. But my go-to is 4-pound mono or fluorocarbon. If you're fishing deep a lot, and especially if you're fishing inside fish houses where it's warm, braided line can be really effective as well. Actually, braided line is probably for sure the go-to if you're going to be fishing mostly inside. So what I like to do is take like 4-pound mono. I like to put a swivel above it, and then I'll have like 4-pound fluorocarbon as the leader, and that's to me is like the perfect setup. And if I happen to catch a walleye, 4-pound is a lot stronger than 2-pound. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. So that's sort of the rod, the reel, and the line. And the biggest thing is just don't overcomplicate it. You don't have to worry about it too much. What I've noticed, you know, you can downsize a lot, but oftentimes what I find is the biggest perch usually just come in increment. And that's why, you know, I'm using a tungsten right now, but that's why you're gonna see a lot of people using hard baits, a lot of people using bigger spoons, because it's like, man, if you really want to work those fish, you know, and use, you know, really light line and finesse, you might be able to get some more of those smaller perch to go, but the big ones, you know, it doesn't seem to matter as much. They just come in and drill your bait, and honestly sometimes you can even just feel those fish bite, you know, because they hit it pretty hard. So that's just a quick little rundown. But yeah, if you wanted the absolute perfect dialed in perch setup, I do think something like the Bullwhip or the Fusion and 36-inch, and then 4-pound main line, and then a 1000 size spinning reel is just going to be your go-to. This is the Carbon X2, which I've been liking a lot. So anyway, that's how I like to set it up. In my spoon rod, especially, I'll have like a tiny little swivel on there, and then a tiny little snap, so I can, you know, not have that line twist thanks to the swivel, and then the snap. It's just so I can be swapping out spoons constantly. And yeah, that's gonna bring us to the next tip. The fifth and final tip that I have for you while chasing perch in the winter is always be changing your presentation. One thing that you'll notice if you spend a bunch of time out on the ice chasing perch is the mood of the fish will change very quickly and very dramatically. So you'll go from fish just loving golden jigs, and you're just catching every fish on golden jigs, and all of a sudden you won't catch any fish, and it's all going to be on pink flutter spoons or whatever. I mean, if you're fishing in a group of guys, or if you're fishing in like a bigger fish house or a wheelhouse, you'll notice really quickly just the fact that, you know, some guys will catch all of the fish, and you'll have fish swimming past your lure to get to that other bait. So when that's happening, you'll obviously they're keyed in on a certain presentation. So the thing about perch is that they're going to change quickly. I mean, if you're fishing perch all day, there might be, you know, 5 different bite windows throughout the day, where I shouldn't even say bite windows, I should say preference windows, where they'll go from maybe wanting spoons in the morning to glide baits, puppet minnows, you know, from 10 to noon or whatever, and then maybe, you know, they'll have a preference for, you know, white tungsten jigs or something for the next couple hours. So always be changing. And there's a lot of reasons why you might want to fish with buddies when you're doing the whole perch deal. Obviously one of those reasons is just covering more water. Another reason is, you know, being able to use electronics and have one guy drilling, one guy moving, and one guy, you know, just trying different holes and whatever. But that said, another really big reason why you want to fish with buddies sometimes is just so you can have 3, 4, 5 different people trying out different presentations, different colors, stuff like that. You can obviously be changing it up, but the more data the better. So color is huge, presentation type is huge. But yeah, I mean, I would also say too, like if you got a tungsten jig and you got a spoon, you know, and maybe they're both the same color, switch them out, and don't just be changing. It's funny because a lot of times, you know, we'll talk about, hey, you should be, you know, forget about color, just worry about the presentation you're using. A lot of times with perch, you know, if you're using spoons, you know, sometimes you just want to be changing colors specifically because the color can make a big difference. So anyway, that's kind of a mouthful, but that's the 5th and final tip. And that's all I got for you. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below, because we got more videos coming in the near future. Until then, we will see you in the next one.